Imagine a summer night in 1856 in a small mountain village called Smiljan, nestled in what was then the Austrian Empire, now Croatia. A violent thunderstorm rages overhead, lightning splitting the sky as a child enters the world at the stroke of midnight. The midwife, superstitious and fearful, declares this a bad omen, calling the baby a child of darkness. But his mother, a strong and intelligent woman, responds with quiet confidence that no, he will be a child of light. She could not have known how prophetic those words would be. The boy born that night was Nikola Tesla, and he would indeed bring light to the world in ways no one could imagine. His father, Milutin Tesla, was an Orthodox priest and a writer, a man of words and faith who hoped his son would follow in his footsteps. His mother, Duka Mandic, never received formal education, but possessed an extraordinary mind. She invented small household appliances and tools to make her work easier, memorized epic Serbian poems, and managed their home with remarkable ingenuity. Young Nikola would later credit his mother's inventive nature and his father's discipline as the dual forces that shaped his genius. He had an older brother, Dane, who was considered the brilliant one, the golden child. But tragedy struck when Nikola was just 5 years old. Dane died in a horse riding accident, though some accounts suggest it might have been a fall down the stairs. The loss devastated the family, and young Nikola grew up in the shadow of his deceased brother's memory, driven by an unconscious need to prove his own worth. From his earliest memories, Nikola experienced the world differently. He had what we might today recognize as a form of synesthesia and an eidetic memory. When he thought of an object or idea, he could see it in 3 dimensions before his eyes, as real as if it existed in the physical world. These visions were so vivid that as a child, he struggled to distinguish them from reality. He would see flashes of light during moments of stress or excitement, and certain sounds would trigger visual phenomena in his mind. Rather than being frightened, he learned to harness this unusual ability, using it to design and test his inventions entirely within his imagination before ever building a physical prototype. His childhood was marked by both curiosity and danger. He nearly drowned multiple times, was almost boiled alive in a vat of milk, and got trapped in a grain storage build. He built a small water wheel as a boy and caught June bugs, gluing them to a paper windmill to create a living engine. He was fascinated by a picture of Niagara Falls in a book and told his uncle that one day he would harness its power with a great wheel. Decades later, he would do exactly that. He read voraciously, sometimes through entire nights, consuming his father's extensive library. When his father discovered this habit was affecting his health, he locked away the books and candles. Nikola picked the locks and continued reading by making his own candles. When he was 7, the family moved to Gospic, a larger town where his father had been promoted. Nikola attended primary school there and later the lower gymnasium. His mathematical ability astounded his teachers, who sometimes accused him of cheating because he could perform complex calculations in his head with such speed. He would later explain that he visualized the numbers and operations spatially, manipulating them in his mind's eye. But formal education bored him, and he chafed against rote memorization and rigid teaching methods. What excited him was experimentation, understanding how things worked, seeing principles in action. At 17, he contracted cholera, a disease that nearly killed him. He was bedridden for 9 months, his condition so grave that doctors gave up hope. During this time, his father, desperate to give him a reason to live, finally relented on his insistence that Nikola enter the priesthood. He promised that if his son recovered, he could attend the engineering school he desperately wanted. This promise may well have saved Nikola's life. He recovered, but immediately faced another obstacle. To avoid the mandatory 3-year draft into the Austro-Hungarian army, he fled to the mountains, spending a year in hiding reading, thinking, and recovering his strength in the wilderness. In 1875, at 19, Tesla enrolled at the Austrian Polytechnic in Graz on a military scholarship. He was a phenomenal student initially, passing 9 exams, nearly twice as many as required, and receiving the highest possible grades. His professors wrote that he was a star of first rank, but it was here that the seeds of his greatest work were planted in an unexpected moment. During a demonstration of a newly arrived Gram dynamo, a direct current generator with a commutator that sparked and crackled, Tesla suggested to his professor that the commutator was inefficient and could be eliminated. His professor, Professor Poschel, publicly ridiculed him, declaring in front of the entire class that such a thing would be like creating perpetual motion, impossible and contrary to the laws of physics. The humiliation stung deeply, but instead of crushing his spirit, it ignited an obsession. From that moment, Tesla dedicated himself to proving his professor wrong, to finding a way to create a motor that ran on alternating current without a commutator. But his second and third years at the Polytechnic took a dark turn. He became addicted to gambling, playing cards, and billiards obsessively, sometimes for more than 48 hours straight. He lost his scholarship money, his allowance, and even his tuition. Though he eventually won it all back and returned the money to his family, the damage was done to this academic standing. He became estranged from his family, too ashamed to return home, and eventually left the school without graduating. He suffered what appears to have been a nervous breakdown, working as a draftsman in obscure positions, cutting contact with his loved ones so completely that they thought he had drowned in the Mur River. His friends placed an obituary in the newspaper. Eventually, he reconciled with his family and moved to Prague to study at Charles Ferdinand University in 1880. But his father died that same year, leaving the family in financial difficulty. Unable to continue his studies, he took a job in Budapest in 1881 at the Central Telegraph Office. It was during a walk in a city park in Budapest in February 1882 at sunset that the answer came to him like a lightning bolt. He was reciting passages from Goethe's Faust to a friend when suddenly the solution to the alternating current motor materialized in his mind with complete clarity. He could see it rotating before his eyes, every part, every dimension, how the rotating magnetic field would spin the rotor without any physical connection. He grabbed a stick and began drawing diagrams. He had solved the puzzle that had tormented him for 6 years. In 1882, he moved to Paris to work for the Continental Edison Company, installing lighting systems throughout Europe. His talents quickly became apparent, and he was sent to Strasbourg in 1883 to fix a problematic railway lighting installation. In his spare time there, he built the first prototype of his alternating current induction motor, demonstrating it to potential investors, but found no interest. The world was not yet ready for his vision. However, his work impressed his supervisors at the Edison Company, and they recommended him to Thomas Edison himself in America, with a letter of recommendation that supposedly read, "I know 2 great men, and you are one of them. The other is this young man." Tesla set sail for New York in 1884 with 4 cents in his pocket, some poems he had written, and drawings of his flying machine design. Thomas Edison was at the height of his fame, the celebrated inventor who had brought electric light to the world through his direct current system. Tesla arrived at Edison's laboratory at 65 Fifth Avenue and impressed the older inventor with his work ethic and ability. But fundamental differences soon emerged. Edison was a practical experimenter, a trial and error man who would test thousands of materials to find one that worked. Tesla worked from theory and mathematical principles, visualizing and perfecting his designs mentally before building them. More significantly, they disagreed fundamentally on the future of electricity. Edison was deeply invested in direct current, which could only travel short distances before losing power, requiring a power plant every few miles. Tesla believed alternating current, which could be stepped up to high voltages for transmission and then stepped down for use, was the future. According to Tesla's account, Edison offered him $50,000 to improve his direct current generators and systems. Tesla worked nearly a year, making significant improvements that saved Edison considerable money. When he asked for the payment, Edison laughed it off, saying Tesla didn't understand American humor, that it had been a joke. Whether this story is entirely accurate remains debated by historians. For a time, he worked as a ditch digger for $2 a day to survive. The man who would revolutionize electricity was digging holes for electric cables. But he used this time to network, talking to engineers and foremen, explaining his alternating current system to anyone who would listen. His persistence paid off. In 1886, he attracted investors who helped him establish the Tesla Electric Light Company. But these businessmen were only interested in his arc lighting system, not his alternating current motor. After getting the patents for the arc lights, they took the company away from him, leaving him with worthless stock certificates. Again, he was penniless, surviving through the harsh winter of 1886 and 1887 doing manual labor. His fortune changed in late 1886 when Alfred Brown, a Western Union superintendent, and Charles Peck, a New York attorney, approached him after hearing about his alternating current system. They agreed to fund his research and help him develop his patents in exchange for a share of the profits. In 1887, Tesla established his laboratory at 89 Liberty Street in Manhattan and set about building working models of his alternating current motors and power transmission systems. He filed over 30 patents. In May 1888, Tesla was invited to present his work to the American Institute of Electrical Engineers. His lecture, A New System of Alternate Current Motors and Transformers, was a sensation among engineers, though the general public barely noticed. But one man who paid very close attention was George Westinghouse, an inventor and industrialist who had made his fortune with air brakes for trains and was now competing with Edison in the electric power business. Westinghouse immediately recognized that Tesla's polyphase system was the missing piece he needed. In July 1888, he visited Tesla's laboratory and, after witnessing demonstrations of the motors, bought the patents and hired Tesla as a consultant for initial payment of $60,000 in cash and stock, plus royalties of $2.50 per horsepower of electrical capacity sold. This began what would be called the War of the Currents. Edison, seeing his direct current empire threatened, launched a vicious public campaign against alternating current, claiming it was deadly and dangerous. He secretly funded the development of the electric chair, using alternating current to associate it with death in the public mind. He paid children to collect stray dogs and cats, which were then publicly electrocuted with alternating current in demonstrations meant to terrify people. He even arranged for the electrocution of an elephant named Topsy, filming it to spread fear of AC power. The campaign was brutal and personal, attacking Westinghouse and, by extension, Tesla's system. But truth and efficiency won out. The superiority of alternating current for long-distance transmission could not be denied by fearmongering. The decisive victory came in 1893 with two major events. First, Westinghouse and Tesla won the contract to illuminate the world's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, the World's Fair, celebrating the 400th anniversary of Columbus's voyage. Against Edison's bitter protests, their alternating current system powered the fair with spectacular success, lighting up the White City with thousands of bulbs, demonstrating to millions of visitors from around the world that alternating current was safe, efficient, and superior. That same year, They won the contract to build the first major hydroelectric power plant at Niagara Falls, the very falls that Tesla had dreamed of harnessing as a child. When the plant opened in 1896, it transmitted power to Buffalo, 22 miles away, something impossible with direct current. The age of alternating current had arrived, and it remains the standard for power distribution worldwide to this day. But at the height of his triumph, Tesla made a decision that would affect him the rest of his life. Westinghouse, facing financial difficulties in 1897 due to the expensive war with Edison and economic conditions, told Tesla that the royalty arrangement in their contract would bankrupt the company. The royalties, at $2.50 per horsepower, would have eventually made Tesla the world's first billionaire. Tesla, believing Westinghouse had treated him fairly when others had not, and valuing their friendship, tore up the contract on the spot. He walked away from untold billions in royalties, asking only for a modest consulting fee. It was an act of extraordinary generosity and extraordinary foolishness, depending on one's perspective. Tesla never became wealthy, while his alternating current system powered the world. In the 1890s, at the height of his fame and creativity, Tesla became a celebrated figure in New York society. He was tall, slender, elegant, always impeccably dressed, speaking 8 languages, dining at the finest restaurants, befriending Mark Twain, J.P. Morgan, Stanford White, and other luminaries. He gave spectacular demonstrations of his electrical devices, passing high-frequency currents through his body to light bulbs in his hands, creating artificial lightning in his laboratory, and making pronouncements about the future that seemed like pure fantasy but were often prophetic. He spoke of wireless communication, robotics, renewable energy, and technologies that wouldn't exist for decades or even a century. His laboratory on South Fifth Avenue became famous for its spectacular and dangerous experiments. He investigated high-frequency and high-voltage phenomena, developing the Tesla coil, a resonant transformer that could generate enormous voltages and create spectacular displays of electrical discharge. He used these coils to explore wireless power transmission, lighting tubes without wires, and investigating the properties of what we now call the electromagnetic spectrum. He pioneered work in radio frequency oscillators, discovering many of the principles that would later be used in radio transmission, though he would not receive credit for this work until long after his death. In 1891, he became an American citizen, a status he was proud of throughout his life. That same year, his revolutionary paper on high-frequency phenomena established him as the leading expert in an emerging field. He investigated X-rays independently shortly after Röntgen's discovery and actually captured some of the first X-ray images in America, though he called them shadow photographs. One of the clearest images was of his friend Mark Twain. Tragically, much of his early research was lost when his laboratory burned down in 1895, destroying years of notes, prototypes, and equipment. The fire devastated him, but he rebuilt and continued his work. In 1899, seeking a location for more ambitious experiments in wireless power transmission, Tesla moved to Colorado Springs, funded by Colonel John Jacob Astor. There, he built a massive laboratory with a tower supporting a large copper sphere and the most powerful Tesla coil ever constructed. The experiments he conducted there were astonishing. He created artificial lightning bolts up to 135 feet long, thunder that could be heard 15 miles away, and claimed to have sent electrical impulses through the earth that lit 200 light bulbs 26 miles away without wires. He studied the Earth's electrical properties, took measurements of electromagnetic radiation from lightning storms, and became convinced that he could create a system to transmit power and information wirelessly anywhere on Earth. He also claimed to have received unusual signals that he believed might be from Mars, making him one of the first people to suggest the possibility of extraterrestrial radio communication. His diary from Colorado Springs reveals a mind working at the absolute edge of known science, sometimes beyond it. Returning to New York in 1900, Tesla began promoting his most ambitious project, a worldwide wireless communication and power transmission system. He secured an initial investment of $150,000 from J.P. Morgan, the most powerful banker in America, to build what became known as Wardenclyffe Tower on Long Island. The facility was designed by his friend, the famous architect Stanford White. The tower would be 187 feet tall, topped with a 55-ton dome, with deep underground shafts for grounding. Tesla envisioned it as the first of many towers that would create a global wireless system for communication and power. But the project was plagued with problems from the start. The costs far exceeded estimates, and in 1901, Guglielmo Marconi successfully transmitted the first transatlantic radio signal using much simpler equipment. Though Marconi's system used many of Tesla's patented inventions, a fact that would later be recognized, investors could not see the point of Tesla's far more expensive and ambitious system when simple radio apparently worked. Morgan refused to invest more money, and Tesla could not find other backers. For years, he struggled to complete Wardenclyffe, pouring in his own money and going into debt. The tower was never completed. In 1917, with World War I raging and Tesla deeply in debt, the tower was demolished and sold for scrap. The failure of Wardenclyffe broke something in Tesla. The confident, celebrated inventor became increasingly withdrawn and eccentric. His later years were marked by isolation, poverty, and increasingly bizarre behavior. He had always been peculiar in his habits, obsessed with cleanliness, terrified of germs, fixated on the number 3, needing to calculate the cubic volume of food before eating it, and uncomfortable with round objects, especially pearls. He had never married or had romantic relationships, claiming that his celibacy was necessary for his scientific work, though he formed deep, platonic friendships with several women. As he aged, these eccentricities intensified. He developed a deep affection for pigeons, especially one particular white pigeon with gray tips on its wings that he claimed he loved as a man loves a woman. He spent his later years feeding pigeons in New York parks and even brought injured ones to his hotel room to nurse them back to health. Despite his poverty, living in increasingly shabby hotel rooms and moving frequently to avoid unpaid bills, his mind remained active. He continued to announce inventions and ideas, some brilliant, some fantastical. He spoke of a teleforce weapon, which the press dubbed a death ray, claiming it could destroy aircraft from 250 miles away. He described in detail an electric car he said he had built in 1931 that ran on cosmic rays. Though no evidence of this vehicle was ever found, he proposed a system to split seawater for fuel, wireless power transmission, and vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. Some of his predictions were remarkably accurate. He foresaw a world of wireless communication, predicted smartphones and the internet, described renewable energy systems, and envisioned robotics and automation. Other ideas ranged from the speculative to the impossible. He believed he could photograph thoughts, claimed to have developed a method of causing the upper atmosphere to glow and provide light at night, and spoke of his ability to split the earth like an apple if he wanted. He became estranged from the scientific community, which had moved on from his alternating current triumphs, and found his later claims increasingly unbelievable without demonstrated proof. His practice of announcing inventions without revealing technical details or producing working prototypes frustrated other scientists. The controversy over radio's invention was particularly bitter. Though he held many of the fundamental patents, Marconi received the Nobel Prize in 1909 for radio. Tesla was furious. taking out advertisements declaring himself the true inventor of radio. The US Patent Office had indeed initially given radio patents to Tesla, but reversed itself in 1904, giving them to Marconi, a decision that would finally be reversed by the US Supreme Court in 1943. 8 months after Tesla's death, in his final years, he subsisted on modest royalty payments from his patents, gifts from Yugoslav American friends, and charitable payments from people like George Westinghouse, who quietly ensured Tesla's hotel bills were paid out of respect for the man who had made his fortune possible. He was struck by a taxi in 1937, suffering broken ribs and a damaged back, injuries from which he never fully recovered. He refused medical treatment, as was his habit, and spent his remaining years largely confined to his room at the New Yorker Hotel. On the morning of January 7, 1943, a maid entered room 3327 of the New Yorker Hotel and found Nikola Tesla dead. He was 86 years old and died alone, as he had lived the last decades of his life. The official cause was coronary thrombosis. His body was discovered with a "Do Not Disturb" sign that had been hanging on the door for 2 days before his family could claim his belongings. Representatives from the FBI's Office of Alien Property seized all his papers and possessions, examining them for anything that might be valuable for the war effort or dangerous in enemy hands. After examination, they declared that his papers contained nothing of value and released them to his family, though conspiracy theories persist that the most important documents were kept classified. His funeral was held at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York, attended by over 2,000 people, including several Nobel Prize winners. His body was cremated, and his ashes were eventually sent to Belgrade, where they now rest in a golden sphere at the Nikola Tesla Museum, surrounded by his remaining papers, patents, and personal effects. Tesla died nearly penniless, but he had given the world incalculable wealth. The system of alternating current power generation and distribution that he invented powers virtually every building in the modern world. The rotating magnetic field principle and induction motor he developed remain fundamental to countless motors and generators. His work on radio frequency technology laid groundwork for radio, television, and wireless communication. His Tesla coil is still used in radios and television sets. His patents and theoretical work contributed to the development of radar, robotics, computers, and countless other technologies. The SI unit of magnetic flux density is named the Tesla in his honor, ensuring his name will be spoken as long as physics is studied. He was a man of profound contradictions, a genius who could visualize complex machinery in perfect detail, yet sometimes struggled with basic social interactions, an inventor who gave the world a trillion-dollar industry, yet died in debt, a visionary who accurately predicted wireless communication, renewable energy, and automation, yet also claimed to receive signals from Mars and believed he could split the Earth in half. A man who counted his steps compulsively and needed everything in multiples of 3, yet whose mind could handle the most abstract and complex mathematical concepts. A man who never married and had no children, yet whose inventions touched billions of lives and will continue to do so for as long as humanity uses electricity. In recent decades, Tesla's reputation has been rescued from obscurity. He is now recognized as one of history's greatest inventors and visionaries, the man who lit the world. His story resonates because it captures both the heights and depths of genius, the price of being ahead of your time, and the difference between fame and fortune. The child born in a lightning storm truly did become a child of light, bringing illumination to the world in ways both literal and figurative. A dreamer whose alternating current continues to pulse through our civilization, powering our present and enabling our future.